I have a great privilege today to introduce our lunchtime speaker. We're so fortunate to have Stephen E. Snow with us today. He's going to talk to us. His topic is about engaging in improving Utah as we grow. And so he has a lot of experience in this area and experience on a lot of different sides. So for a time, he was with the Washington County Attorney's Office, a lawyer for several Washington County municipalities. Also was called as a general authority in 2001 and spent quite a bit of time as the church historian um, in the presidency of the 70. Since his release, he's returned to his hometown here and sits now on the Virgin River Land Trust. So we are so fortunate to have him with us, and what a treat we'll have for lunch today. We'll turn the time over to him and enjoy.
Thank you very much. Welcome to St. George. We're having nice weather all over the state, so I can't welcome you to the great weather, but it's good to have you here. I know I was given a specific topic, but I kind of ignored it, and I've got something else to share with you. I thought you might be interested in a little bit of the historical perspective of St. George, and then I wanted to talk to you a little bit about representing small towns in the Washington County area some 30, 40 years ago when we were a much smaller place. But it was just a half a mile from here to the south when Brigham Young and some of the Indian those had been called on Indian missions, the Indian missionaries, met with him at a place called Tonnequin, just about a half a mile south. And at that point in time, May 1861, St. George, there was nothing between these two ridges. Nothing had been settled. And he looked in silence up at the valley towards the north. He saw trees and fields and homes softening the harsh contours of the giant relief map that stretched in front of him. And he said, "There will yet be built between those volcanic ridges a city with spires, towers, and steeples, with homes containing many inhabitants." And of course, those that were with him never thought such a thing could ever happen. But in October of that year, in 1861, he called just over 300 families out of the audience to come to St. George and to colonize. And that was October, and they arrived late November, believe it or not. It takes about a month to get here. And they arrived here late November, early December. So really amazing experience. It was rough. There were harder missions. I think the Muddy was probably a more difficult mission down St. Thomas, down in that area. But this was pretty tough. It rained the first 40 days they were here, at least some time during the day. Everything was wet. The clay, you could just imagine what it was like they had camped on the clay flats out by the college, and it was just tough. Now, it took Brigham Young a while to just get 300 families that would come, and a good number of those left after they'd been here a while. No surprise to that. Really, what caused the community to be established was two public works projects, the Tabernacle up the street from here, and of course the temple, which you see. Lyman Hafen describes it as an iceberg in the desert, which is a pretty good description. But those two public works projects enabled families to get a little tithing scrip to provide for their families with the foodstuffs that they needed. I just wanted to review the census to give you some idea of what was happening during the years when the community was first established. The first census was, of course, 1870. There was 1,142 people that lived in St. George. 10 years later, there were 1,384. Uh, they also, back then in 1880, asked who was practicing plural marriage in the homes in the community. And as a young missionary in Germany, I was told I served an LDS mission there, and I was told only 2 to 3% of the members of the church practiced plural marriage. I started going around the block here in St. George, identifying the families I knew, and I was pretty sure that 2 or 3% wasn't correct. Well, the 1880 census showed that 52% of the population of St. George in 1880 was in polygamous households. A very interesting fact. When my grandfather was born at the early in the 20th century, there were 1,690 people living in St. George, not even 2,000 people. When my father was born, there were just over 2,000. And when I was born, there was less than 5,000 with 4,562. So it stayed a pretty small place for almost 100 years until 1960. Between 1940 and 1950, between 1930 and 1940, during the war years, they saw growth of 47%. And by 1960, there were 5,000 people here in St. George, which was, I remember when we reached that point, that was a big deal. We always compared the size of the phone book with Cedar City. We had the same phone book, and we'd count up the pages to see if we were ahead of Cedar City yet. And in most of my time as a young man, we were behind Cedar City. Cedar City was larger. But by the time I took off for school after my mission in 1970, we were up to 7,000 people, and things started to change. Uh, Honestly, in my early years of attending school up north, people made fun of my accent. But by the time I finished law school 7 years later, they were asking me what condominium project should they buy into. So things changed a lot with the perception of St. George. There was a record made by some comedians about the gorgeous orange farmer that mimicking this St. George accents. Uh, we bounced along pretty well. 1980, there was 11,000 people. So we were starting to see growth, and that was mainly from Bloomington. We saw Bloomington come online, which was something that was just really amazing to us that this housing project could really be successful. TerraCore had a very uh, aggressive sales program, sold lots, the Las Vegas airport, uh, all over the country for that matter, and brought a lot of people into this area with the Bloomington and later the Bloomington Hills project. Uh, there's several reasons probably why we have growth, not dissimilar to the rest of the Southwest. Air conditioning was huge for southern Utah. I mean, refrigerated air conditioning is really what made the difference. We've had evaporative cooling for many years, but the refrigerated air conditioning made a huge difference in this country. I asked my grandfather, who was born in 1904 and died in 1974. His life covered some amazing years. And I said, what was, in your mind, the most important invention? Now, this is a guy that saw the first car come to St. George, the first airplane land in a field south of St. George. Uh, I thought, it'd be something like that. And he said it was evaporative air conditioning. He said because the babies could make it through the summer. They could live through the summer. If a mother had a child before that in the spring, there was a high likelihood that that baby would die just simply because of the heat. And if you go to the northwest corner of the old cemetery in St. George, you'll just see scores of graves of little children that didn't survive that first year. The thought was that you needed to have your child in the fall, early fall, so that they could put on some weight and be able to take on the first summer at a little larger than an infant. So, golf here made a big difference. Uh, you may have heard the story of some local citizens banding together and pushing the creation of a nine-hole golf course on city property. That's the Red Hills Golf Course. That was a total effort by local individuals and constructed by the city. Uh, uh, and that's been a very busy little golf course for many, many years. Completed in 1965, was the first golf course in Washington County, and it started, uh, all the golf courses that we now have. It wasn't the first time the golf courses came up. A relative of mine, Harold S. Snow, was the president of the St. George Temple for 25 years, and he was always looking at ways to improve, to get more temple work accomplished. And he knew that Heber J. Grant was a keen golfer. He loved to golf. And so he wrote a letter suggesting that the church build a golf course in St. George, and then the people could golf in the morning and then go do temple work in the afternoon. He thought this was a brilliant idea, and this would keep people in town instead of going down to California. He thought this would be a great idea. And on March 26, 1938, Heber J. Grant responded to his letter, and he said, "Dear Brother Snow, your letter of March 23rd has been received. Regarding the golf club, as I have told you and have told others, I think there is much to be said for a golf club in St. George, primarily on the theory that it would assist in drawing people down there in the winter time, perhaps for temple work, who otherwise might go on to California. I think, therefore, it might prove to be a real asset to the city of St. George to have a golf course. I think, moreover, that it should be built by you people there. I'm afraid we can hardly justify the expenditure of church funds to build a golf course, as there are so many other things that are needed." This is during the Depression, of course. "So all I could give you would be my well wishes, and these I assure you have for this project. Faithfully yours, signed Heber J. Grant." So that idea was being kicked around as early as the 1930s, but finally uh, took hold in 1965 with the construction of the Red Hills Golf Course. And that little golf course, in my opinion, was the golf course that convinced TerraCorp to build Bloomington Hills, or Bloomington Golf Course, in order to sell homes. They originally were looking at a, a aquarium project to give 10-acre homes so people could have pastures and horses. And but it was decided on the north side of the river they could do smaller lots around the golf course and be more profitable. And so they built the Bloomington Golf Course. And other courses followed, such as Green Spring and Sunbrook, Sky Mountain and Hurricane. Then we have Entrada and Sand Hollow and Copper Rock, and finally this black desert that has recently been built that is just has a national reputation already. So it's been quite a time to watch the golf take hold here, and that's been a real draw for a lot of people that that have come. The other thing is disposable income. Since World War II, people have had more disposable income, and that's been an advantage to much of the Southwest because people have come to the Southwest for a second home, or they come here as snowbirds, uh, similar to what's happened here. There have been some challenges, and that might be interesting to some of you, developers and some with the communities and the state. I'll list a number of them, then talk just briefly about a few of them. One that has probably bothered most of us who've grown up here and lived here is the scar on the Black Hill next to the D. Uh, if you're new and maybe haven't noticed it, take a look at it. You'll never not look at it again. In the 1990s, the listing of the desert tortoise as a endangered species, with the identification of much acreage north of St. George as being prime tortoise habitat. Of course, from the very beginning, taming the Virgin River with dams that could divert the flow of the river for irrigation was a huge, huge challenge. Wasn't really successfully accomplished in the Washington Fields until the end of the uh, 1800s when they finally completed the Washington Fields Dam. Recessions over time have uh, caused difficulty. My grandpa used to say we didn't really know when the Depression came because it was always bad here, so we didn't really know it was the Depression. But since we've turned into primarily a real estate and a real estate construction economy, the cyclical nature of interest rates have had a dramatic impact on the community, and even earthquakes have done damage in the past. As late as 1992, we had a pretty bad earthquake.
and we're down zoning from the